All right, so I guess we'll start talking about the, worrying about the money purses and money strings and money pits of spending money on AI. Okay. All right. Welcome to Das Won't Hunt. I'm Jiao Pierre Ruth for Information Week. And today we are going to take a look at the question of how do companies know if they overspend on AI and then potentially, if they need to, try to recover. We're definitely in the spirit where it is the early-ish stages of this particular era of making use of AI, and organizations, enterprises are doing their best to try to find ways that they're going to take advantage of this. And there might be a potential thought urge to potentially might want to have a blank check to put money towards it, but the reality of whether or not that's going to be best for the organization and with that can actually result in an actual return is a whole other story. So we're going to dissect this, and I've got a good group today joining us for the conversation. We have Manish Goyal, Vice President and Senior Partner for AI and Analytics for IBM Consulting.
Hello.
Richard Buractaon, Head of AI at Andesite.
Hey.
Carter Busse, CIO for Workato. And Ashok Reddy, CEO for KX. All of you, thank you so much for making the time and being on the show today.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matthew.
Great to be here. Yep.
Okay, great. All right, so Ashok, let's get into the big lead question is, at what point should the ROI for what's being invested in AI be measured? How long should companies kind of wait to see the potential efficiencies turn into some kind of, if they can measure it, a real monetary returns?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think one of the things you have to start with is, how do the interplay between what I think about as there are tasks, jobs, and the entire business transformation in the context of AI investment. So we work a lot in capital markets. I'm here in Wall Street, and we look at one is if you look at a task, for example, the ROI is really about specific tasks like AI is used for algorithmic trading. And in that case, people measure the speed and accuracy and efficiency of each task. So if a big bank is looking at all their commercial loan agreements, for example, you can do that in seconds now versus like 360,000 hours manual work. How do you go about analyzing commercial loan agreements? But then if you move up to the next level, like a job, so there AI could look at an entire job role. People who are looking at traders and portfolio managers, you look at the productivity of them, maybe how much more they can do in terms of whether they improve the algorithmic trading, the productivity. Then the third part is more at a business transformation level. And typically that tends to be, it's the overall decision making in the company. For example, some of the biggest hedge funds are now using AI to manage the risk. If you have $20 trillion in assets, how can I use AI on a large scale? So the quantitative funds or quants are becoming AI quants and AI funds. So that's the way to measure it. It depends on whether it's the tasks or jobs or overall at a business level.
Gotcha. Awesome. Really appreciate your insights on that. Okay. Richard, what happens if a different technology, whether it's new or old, proves to be more efficient and effective than the current AI effort that we are seeing happening right now?
Yeah, it's like the landscape has changed, because before it used to be it's all about getting that data and then getting those measurements in. But since many folks now are building as generative AI, that the model's not under your control, so you have to be ready for the next thing. So planning for rapid advancement is kind of like the way of the world these days. So like flexibility is key. And there's one thing like many people do is like they adopt they take a framework because it's like here's one, but don't get trapped. And so it's really about making sure that the teams can advance, and then don't get into that sunk cost fallacy of like we invested everything in. I'm just going to pick on a framework like Llama Index. Our team right now is like, well, we got to extract it because we can do more now faster with other things, but sometimes more than just faster. But yeah, that's the main thing, just being flexible, because you have to. Like O3 is around the corner now for OpenAI. And there's a lot of things that it can do for the planning stage that you may have already built that you probably and no one likes rip and replace. It's a really hard position to be in as a developer.
Gotcha.
JP, if I can just add a little bit to what Richard said, right? One of the things that, in conversations with a lot of clients, right, because I have a global role, I work with clients across the globe. The thing that we have seen a lot about in the last 18 months or so is, right, that, every problem, the solution is generative AI or foundation models, right? And that's really not the right approach to looking at it, right? If you look at sort of the end-to-end workflow that you're trying to optimize, right, you want to understand sort of how are you doing it today? What are the technologies being used there today? What's the KPI that you're driving? And do you really believe that with the step change in technology, you can drive much better KPIs, right? And you may then rethink that process, right? Where you may have some RPA and some other technologies to say, I can do a whole bunch of it now in a different order with generative AI here, a human in the loop here, XYZ here, right? And really, that's sort of the starting point that folks should be thinking about, right? And it's not about just the the new technology, but what are you trying to achieve and how are you going to do that? And the thing that I'll add to it is anytime you make a change to a workflow or process, right? The change management of the people who are actually doing that process, if you don't intentionally drive that change management, you will not get adoption. You will lose the people which are already very fearful about jobs in this world of AI, right? So you've got to be very intentional of driving that change and adoption to actually get to the value and the ROI.
Gotcha. Do appreciate your, Richard, appreciate your thoughts, and Manish, I do appreciate your quick thoughts on that. And Manish, actually, the next question going to you, should other departments outside of IT, watch the expenses and costs that might arise from the introduction of AI resources and their potentially, I guess, ancillary impact?
Yeah, I mean, the answer is absolutely yes, right? Because this is not just the CIO's role. This is not just the CEO's role. I'll just give you some stats, right? I think this was a survey done by Gartner, right? In terms of who is responsible for AI initiative delivery. And if you look at it, right, 20% CIOs, roughly the same 19% CTO, and 19% AI leader, right? And lead in the rest. You ask the question as to, what is the primary source of funding for the AI initiatives? It's only 31% from IT roles, right? 52% is from non-IT functions, right? Which is BU or functional budget or the AI budget, right? And digital business. So in the world that, where this is sort of the data points, you really need, to be able to drive a singular sort of, AI strategy that is supporting your business strategy and have the key stakeholders all involved in this, right? And not just say, well, that's the CIO's role. Not maybe Carter might have a different perspective on this, but really that's sort of how what we are seeing and what we are advising our clients.
Okay, Carter. So how can companies salvage their efforts if their original AI plan goes completely bust? Should they regroup for a different approach with AI, or should they kind of give up and move on to potentially something else?
Yeah, I was listening to Richard and Manish's comments earlier, and I'm going to reflect on that. And you use the word salvage. Implementing AI is not like implementing a big ERP. It's not like implementing a big CRM or supply chain system that could last for months to years. It's not like that. Just like Richard said, you got to be incredibly flexible. You can't get trapped. You got to be able to pivot quickly. And that's where I think the budgets needs to line up too, and the CIOs need to align with the business. So right now we're such early stages, like you said in the beginning of this podcast. You got to be able to pivot and move fast and fail fast. And one thing, just like Manish says about thinking differently, you really got to think differently. In order to do that, at Workato, a lot of my team is 20s to 30s. And if you give them the power of AI to rethink a business process, it's game changing. And let them fail fast. And it's our jobs at the senior levels to really shepherd that creativity, but also, just like Manish said, the change management is tough. Processes change. Jobs will be changing. It's our job to help that change management, but let the creativity at the bottom be able to fail fast.
Gotcha. Awesome. All right, Carter, listen, I appreciate your thoughts on that. Very good insights. And all of you, I appreciate your individual insights on each of those questions. All right. Now we can definitely go back to some of these topics that you discussed, but this question is for all of you. Obviously, new technology or a new resource or a new strategy, it costs money. How can companies temper their expectations and hopefully not panic at new expenses related to, it's probably not just for AI, but for AI, in this instance, AI development and deployment. How there might be, like a deep inhale that starts to happen that within organizations when they start to see things add up. How can they kind of really temper themselves and maybe not rush to do something else when they start seeing things start to show up that they might not have been actually prepared for.
I'll start, and I think it's that in that long vision planning, and like I mentioned about being flexible, is like one of the ways that I looked at it back when I was a researcher is like you're planning like a mission to Mars, but you're happy when you land on the moon. So there's a lot of intermediate milestones you can build along the way, and those are the ones that you should probably monetize and do. So you may not get the whole big picture, and then also don't wait. Like a lot of these with generative AI, it's like there's a lot of human in the loop. There's a lot of things that you're already measuring with like customer satisfaction or whatever task you're trying to do. And so balance those gains against those costs, from like continually in this world.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense. In our company, we are actually started off with certain areas like legal department and others where it provides immediate productivity improvements before we roll it out across the company. And it's not that it's an investment, but it's also a reallocation of it, right? A lot of times we're spending some things today, and when we start looking at AI, it's not generative AI. We have been doing machine learning and other things, but now this is bringing an additional component to it. So we kind of look at that as how do I now? It's easy to see that how much manual effort is spent on looking at all the legal documents and contracts we have versus, but then we have to measure the accuracy, and so it's more about learning from it, and then we have to worry about the IP issues and not training the external models. So then you start thinking about how to architect things and how do you make sure that your IP is protected, and also just employees have to know when to use external tools. People don't understand the things what you use on a personal, because even if you restrict on a company, they end up using their personal version of these things, and it's easy for people to upload a document and start getting summaries. So it really comes down to not only you're panicking, but it's more about are we giving up IP is a bigger concern for many companies.
I'm gonna go off what Ashok said about architecture. As a CIO and my peers, and I'm sure people on this call, we've all been bit by, oh gosh, we have a massive AWS bill this month, or oh gosh, we have a massive Google bill this month because of some rogue service or process that went off. We've all been bit by that, and I think we know as we're implementing AI, we got to put these architectures and the guardrails in place so that we don't get bit by costs. And we've all been bit by that. So that was our process going in with our relationship with some of these LLMs was, okay, let's put some guardrails in place first so it doesn't go haywire like that happened 2 years ago in our AWS bill. So we've been bit by this before.
Yeah, I mean, I think just to add to that, I find that a lot of the banks are having these tokens. CIOs will issue for different teams to use tokens they use with each LLM. It's almost like a Hunger Games for tokens. Everybody fights over the tokens and trying to go and try to optimize it. So it's because of how many tokens each one has, right? So I definitely agree. The architecture, how we're using it across the company, different departments, it is a big issue.
And I'll just add, right? I mean, I think, again, if you step back and look at sort of, what as an enterprise, right? How are you trying to drive growth and change, given that there is a step change in capability that is available, right? There's a bucket where you're trying to drive sort of individual productivity, right? So whether, you get Copilot for your employees, right? They, get easier summaries of meetings, they can catch up and, action items and all that stuff, right? So there's this, does it actually drive a ton of value? But it does drive a lot of appreciation from employees in terms of, satisfaction, right? And yes, that may be worth it there. You look at sort of more process pieces of it, right? And there you have very clear KPIs, right? And if you do it right, you know whether you're making an impact and freeing up that productivity or whatever to drive either reduce costs or drive growth initiatives that was not possible before. And the third category where you may say, okay, you know what, because of what is available now, we're going to go into a completely new, a different business model or a new product, and that's a bigger bet that we're making, right? And so that's your sort of portfolio that you're working with, right? And depending on sort of how you split across those three, right, you can manage it. And for the middle bucket, right, where you're working on your processes and driving optimization, you do have your KPIs that exist today. So what you're spending with the LLMs and others, right, and the associated databases, new databases, and other things that are needed, because it's not just the LLM, right? All of this plus the people cost is sort of what you're putting in from an ROI perspective, right? So I mean, that's sort of how we advise sort of clients to look at that portfolio.
Gotcha. Okay. Appreciate the thoughts on that. Does a barometer exist that companies can, say, compare their AI expenses against? Is there any sense of a reasonable percentage of a budget that could be spent on AI at this stage, or we're still really trying to figure this out?
There is, a bunch of folks, including ourselves at IBM, through our IBV, it's your business value, sort of, we have done surveys as to sort of, what percentage of the IT budgets are being spent on AI, right? And what we have seen is there has been a significant increase of that allocation, right, of what they're allocating towards AI. So at an aggregate level, you can get a sense of that. We just actually did through Morning Consult, we did a survey in November of last year, right? And over 60% of 2,500 IT professionals that we were interviewed said that they are increasing their AI budget. So directionally, you get a sense of sort of what's happening both as a percentage of IT budgets and overall investment in AI.
I think the flip side of it is I just saw on a headline that most people, companies, the majority of them have an AI-driven productivity improvements, cost savings of 30% or so across the company. So it's kind of, while they may be investing in AI, but it may be also a shift in terms of the other areas where they're spending today.
Yep, agreed.
Yeah, I was going to add, it's also like where you're applying the AI. And so it's like for us, like, the problems that I'm working on, it's that we're trying to help the human person in the loop. And so what are the efficiency gains on that? So if you're measuring, so our barometer is it the workloads like stress, like the product we're building is something for like security operations centers. And so you can measure how much their workflow efficiency is, and then, hey, now we're knowing we're doing well. And so, yeah, it's really task dependent, I guess, is my main point.
Yeah, Manish, I'm really glad you went first, because I don't know. I personally don't have a barometer. I asked my peers, my CEO peers. We don't really have one. We're just that we have kind of new budgets and new at leadership level, the CEO, CFO, to like, just go do it. So I was glad you answered that question. I would like to know, like, percentage wise, what is AI's, in the last year, like this year's probably be a good measurement of how much spend of IT budgets is AI now. And AI is like, is it what you spent with the LLMs? Is it what you're spending on the individual software plus their agents? So it's kind of all mixed in. It's hard to say. Every software has AI now.
Exactly, right? Most enterprise software, right, whether it's SAP or Salesforce or what have you, right, all have AI built into it, right, with additional costs for those features and capabilities. Right. So yeah, it gets very it's difficult to entangle, right, or disentangle, I should say, right, what is what. From
right.
Yeah. But I think the general trend is there is a shift, as Ashok was saying, right, and an increase in budgets towards AI, because clear line of sight to there's value to be had.
Right, and we're finding as we're selling our software that there is more budget for software and the budget's coming from non-IT departments,
Exactly.
where the sales or customer support is looking to spend money on AI, pushing IT to buy tools.
Yeah, I mean, it's moving from productivity and the back office improvements to more of a front office, right? It is driving revenue, customer acquisition, or how is it improving your competitiveness? So that's where I think you get a lot more business, line of business asking for this. So that's the incremental thing versus just savings at the back end.
Right.
All right, and one more question to round us out. I guess the hard question that many organizations really have to weigh for themselves. When should companies take a hard step back, reassess if they actually should continue to pour money into chasing what they might have presumed would have been their AI Shangri-La, but then it turns into not that?
I mean, I can go first. So the way I advise clients to think about this, right, is you're usually going to be in that problem if you started out without a clear alignment between your business strategy and how your AI investments is supporting your business strategy, right? Both maybe driving operational efficiency or driving growth, right? You need to be very clear on sort of what it is that you're trying to do and how your AI strategy supports that. If you've done that and then you have sort of laid out clear markers, right, KPIs, in most cases, those KPIs are the KPIs that you measure today, right? There may be some softer ones around sort of employee NPS because they've been given tools, but largely you have clear KPIs around it. So if you're managing your portfolio and your initiatives, appropriately, you would have checkpoints early enough to say, well, something is not working here. Let's look at it and shift direction or rethink what our initial hypothesis was and go a different way. It is the situation you were describing, JP, is if you just weren't aligned at the beginning and you just spent a ton of money, right, without any controls on it, right, is where you would end up otherwise. I don't know. I'm curious to hear others' thoughts.
Yeah, in my industry, we called it getting stuck in prototype purgatory. And so that is where you're just constantly spending money. And so the success comes from finding the real metric is the adoption. So whatever tech is it being adopted? So whether it's a user or it's an automated system is the sooner you can get it into a production system and all of that and start seeing those gains will help get you out of that that worst spot.
Richard, that sort of relates to me. I feel like we have some great ideas. We have this skunkworks projects, but I'm just like, let's get them out there. Let's go. Yeah. And it's just like we said at the beginning, Manish, it's the change management. It's people are like, whoa, this makes my job easier, but do they need my job now? Right. And that's where my job has become so much more important, is the communication across the company at the executive level, where we had this really neat, cool skunkworks projects going on. But let's get them out. Let's go. And realize that value, and then be able to, like I said in the beginning, pivot fast, fail fast.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree. I think that looking at what I said about tasks versus jobs, right? If you start with some assumption, you're going to either automate a task or a job. But if you don't, and then you continue to have both, you got both. It has to be some hard savings, because otherwise, if you're not really getting the whole job done or task done, you just wasted, doing more things, but not getting the ROI. So it's really, you need to establish what specific things, like whether it's a task or a job, and then is it improving the accuracy before than what they were doing? So there has to be some meaningful thing which saves, so you don't have to hire new people, even if you don't want to use that as a way to cut people. But so that's, not eliminating jobs, but more maybe not requiring as many new jobs.
Gotcha. Great. Fantastic. Well, listen, you all have had some really great insights, and I really appreciate you speaking on this. Carter, Manish, Richard, Ashok, thank you so much for being on the show. Really appreciate your thoughts and insight on this.
Glad to be here.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you all.
To listen to the entire conversation, look for the Das 100 podcast on Spreaker, Spotify, Amazon Music, and other popular podcast platforms.